I was scrolling through Facebook late one night, half distracted by a rerun humming on the TV, when I saw the photo that stopped my heart. A little girl, barely 3 years old, was sitting on a picnic blanket in a tiny yellow dress, smiling up at the camera with eyes so bright they seemed to hold the sun. Those eyes. Those dimples. That tiny curl that always fell over the left eyebrow. I froze. Because I knew that face. I'd memorized it from the only ultrasound picture I ever kept. The one I'd buried in a box, tucked deep inside a drawer I swore I'd never open again. It couldn't be. But deep in my bones, I knew. That was my daughter. And the woman holding her, smiling like she'd found the light of her life, was my best friend. Claire. My hands trembled so violently I nearly dropped my phone. My mind went blank, like my body forgot how to think, how to breathe, how to even exist in that moment. I clicked on the photo, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The caption read, "Our little miracle turns 3 today. I can't believe how lucky I am to be your mom." The words blurred. The room tilted. "Lucky," she said. My best friend had adopted my baby, the child I had carried, cried for, and given up because I believed she'd be safe, loved, and far away from my world of broken promises. And Claire had never said a word. Not during the nights I cried on her couch. Not when she held my hand through the adoption paperwork. Not even when she promised me, "You'll heal someday. You'll move on." Now, years later, she was the one raising the baby I'd loved more than life itself. And she'd done it in silence. It wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure. It was as if my entire heartbreak, my entire sacrifice, had been turned into her fairy tale. I scrolled through more photos, each one slicing deeper than the last. My daughter, her daughter, on Christmas morning, covered in wrapping paper. On Halloween, dressed as a tiny bumblebee. On the first day of preschool, holding Claire's hand. Every moment I'd dreamed of, every milestone I'd imagined from afar, was there, just without me. I threw my phone onto the couch and buried my face in my hands. My breath came in ragged gasps, and tears streamed down my face like I'd been holding them in for 3 years straight. How could she? How could she know, and still say nothing? It took me a full hour to stop shaking. I sat in silence, replaying every conversation, every moment that now had a new, horrifying meaning. The night I told Claire I was pregnant. The morning I confessed that I couldn't keep the baby, that I was scared, broke, and alone. The way she'd hugged me tight and whispered, "You're so brave for doing what's right." And then the agency, the endless paperwork, the social worker visits. I'd trusted the system. Trusted that my daughter would go to a family who wanted her desperately. A family that would cherish her, protect her, never make her feel unwanted. I never imagined that family would be sitting right next to me the entire time. Claire had been my rock. My sister in everything but blood. We'd grown up together, sleepovers, prom nights, late-night talks about marriage, kids, and growing old side by side. When I found out I was pregnant at 23, she was the first person I told. I can still remember that night like a movie burned into my brain. It was raining outside, the kind of slow, steady drizzle that makes the world feel too quiet. I sat on her couch, a crumpled test in my trembling hand, whispering words I could barely process. She didn't gasp. She didn't scold. She just pulled me into a hug and said we'd figure it out together. She even went with me to my first doctor appointment. She held my hair when I threw up from morning sickness. She stayed up late helping me look at adoption agencies online when I said I couldn't do it alone. I thought she was saving me. Now I see she was just waiting. Waiting for me to break enough to give her exactly what she wanted. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I couldn't. I just sat in my apartment, staring at the photo again and again until my tears ran dry. At noon, I texted her. "Can we talk? It's important." She replied almost instantly. "Of course. Everything okay?" My throat tightened. I wanted to scream at her through the phone. To send her that photo and demand an explanation. But part of me needed to see her face. I needed to look into her eyes when she lied. We met that evening at our usual cafe, the one where we'd spend half our 20s dreaming about the future. When she walked in, my breath caught. She looked happy. Radiant, even. There was a glow to her I'd never seen before. The glow of someone who had everything she ever wanted. And in that instant, I hated her for it. We sat down, and for a moment, I couldn't find my voice. I just watched her stir her coffee, laughing about something trivial, while I was drowning in silence. Finally, I slid my phone across the table. The picture of the little girl stared up between us. Her smile faded. Her hand froze midair. And I saw it, just a flicker of panic in her eyes before she masked it with a calm I didn't recognize. "Where did you find that?" she asked softly. "Don't," I said. My voice was barely above a whisper. "Don't pretend you don't know." She looked down at the photo again, and for a long moment, she said nothing. Then she sighed, like the weight of her secret had just caught up to her. "I was going to tell you," she murmured. I almost laughed. 3 years, Claire. You had 3 years. Her eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't feel sorry for her. Not when I'd spent every one of those years trying to make peace with the decision that had already shredded me. She tried to explain, something about timing, about wanting to protect me, about thinking I'd moved on. But every word sounded like poison. Because the truth was simple. She'd looked me in the eyes while I signed away my daughter. She'd held my hand through the hardest choice of my life. And the whole time, she knew she was taking her. When I left that cafe, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just walked out into the cold, my breath fogging in the night air, feeling like I'd been hollowed out from the inside. I had thought the pain of giving up my child was the worst I'd ever feel. But this was worse. Because now I knew that the one person I'd trusted most had turned my pain into her happiness. And I didn't know if I'd ever forgive her for it. The night after I saw that photo, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, my daughter's, flashing behind my eyelids like a cruel mirage. Her little smile, her hair tied up with a yellow bow, her hand gripping Claire's like it was the safest place in the world. I kept thinking about the day I signed the papers. It was raining, same as it had been when I told Claire I was pregnant. I remember the smell of the office, sterile, cold, like it was designed to drain emotion from the room. The adoption agent was kind, professional, and distant. She spoke in terms like placement and transition, like we were discussing furniture instead of a life I was giving up. I remember my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the pen. I remember Claire sitting beside me, rubbing my back and whispering that it was the right thing to do. And I remember her tears. They looked like empathy. Now, I know they were guilt. That realization made me physically sick. I ran to the bathroom and threw up until I had nothing left. The next few days passed in a fog. I stopped answering calls, stopped going to work, stopped pretending I was okay. My apartment felt too quiet, too heavy. Every corner of it echoed with the ghost of my decisions. When I finally picked up my phone again, there were dozens of messages from Claire. "Please talk to me. You don't understand. I never meant to hurt you. Can we meet again?" Each one chipped away at the wall I was trying to build. Part of me wanted to block her number and erase her from my life completely. But another part, the broken, desperate part, still wanted to understand. So I agreed to meet. We met in the park that weekend. I chose that spot deliberately because I couldn't bear to be trapped in a cafe again. I needed space. Air. Somewhere I could run if I couldn't breathe. When I saw her walking up the path, pushing a stroller, I almost turned and left. But my legs wouldn't move. The little girl was asleep, her small chest rising and falling under a pink blanket. My daughter. I wanted to scoop her up and never let go. To tell her everything, to apologize for every night I spent thinking of her, for every tear I'd shed while wondering if she was happy, if she was safe, if she ever thought of me. But I couldn't move. I could barely even look. Claire sat down beside me on the bench, her hands gripping the stroller handle like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. She doesn't know, she said quietly. She just knows me as Mom. The words hit me like a physical blow. Of course she doesn't, I managed to say. She's 3. But you knew. You knew from the start. Her lips trembled. I didn't plan it. We'd been trying for years. The agency matched us with a birth mother through a separate counselor, and I didn't realize it was you until your file came through. I was shocked. I stared at her, waiting for the rest. For something that would make sense of this nightmare. But you didn't tell me, I said. She swallowed. You were already falling apart. I thought telling you would make it worse. I thought it would stop you from signing. And you said you couldn't do it alone. I couldn't let her go. My breath caught. Couldn't let her go? I repeated, my voice cracking. She was my daughter. I know. Her voice broke. And she's mine now, too. The audacity of that sentence burned through me like fire. I stood up, shaking. You stole her, Claire. She looked up at me, tears spilling down her face. I saved her. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Just the sound of the wind and a distant child laughing somewhere nearby. I stared at the stroller again, at the little hand poking out from under the blanket. I wanted to reach out, but I was terrified. Terrified that if I touched her, I'd break. Instead, I turned away. I trusted you, I said softly. You watched me give away the one thing I loved more than anything, and you let me. You could have told me. You could have given me a choice. She didn't answer. And that silence was the answer. After that day, I stopped seeing her. I couldn't. Every reminder of her was a reminder of what I'd lost. I tried therapy. I tried new hobbies. I even tried moving to a new city for a while. But the wound never closed. Every birthday that passed, I thought about the little girl blowing out candles somewhere without knowing her real mother was sitting alone, crying over a photo she wasn't supposed to have. Every milestone that showed up on Claire's social media, first day of school, family vacations, matching Christmas sweaters, it was like being stabbed over and over again. People told me to let it go. To accept that I made my choice. But I hadn't chosen her. I had chosen adoption. I had chosen love. I had chosen trust. And Claire had twisted that into betrayal. Years passed before I saw them again in person. It was at a grocery store of all places. I was reaching for a carton of milk when I heard a tiny voice call out, "Mommy." I turned instinctively, and there she was. My daughter. Older now, maybe 5 or 6. Her curls were longer, her smile brighter. She was wearing a little pink backpack covered in stars. And then Claire appeared behind her, her hand gently resting on the girl's shoulder. Our eyes met. The world seemed to fall away. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she gave a small, polite smile, the kind strangers give when passing someone they used to know. But I wasn't a stranger. And neither was she. The little girl looked up at me curiously, tilting her head the same way I used to when I was her age. "Hi," she said softly. My heart shattered. I smiled back, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hi, sweetheart." Before Claire could say anything, I turned and walked away, leaving my groceries behind. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open the car door. That night, I cried harder than I had in years. Because I realized something that broke me all over again. She didn't know me. She never would. But that wasn't the end. A year later, I got an unexpected call from the same adoption agency that handled my case. The woman on the line said she was updating records and asked if I'd be open to leaving contact information in case the child ever wanted to find me as an adult. My heart leapt. I said yes immediately. And then, almost as an afterthought, the woman mentioned something strange. She said, "I'm glad to see your file is complete now. We had some inconsistencies before, but everything matches up perfectly with the adoptive family's paperwork." My stomach dropped. Inconsistencies? She hesitated. "It's nothing serious. Just that one of the references listed for the adoptive mother was the same as your emergency contact. Unusual, but everything checked out." My blood ran cold. Emergency contact. That was Claire. She had inserted herself into every part of my adoption process, making sure the agency trusted her. Making sure the match went through. It wasn't an accident. It was planned. She'd orchestrated the entire thing. That night, I went through all my old boxes, the ones I'd buried in the back of my closet. I found the original paperwork, the copies the agency had given me, the old notes scribbled by hand. And there it was, in black ink. Adoptive parent reference, Claire M. Daniels. I felt my hands go numb. She hadn't just taken advantage of the situation. She'd engineered it. She pretended to help me find a home for my baby, while secretly ensuring that home would be hers. I didn't sleep that night either. I just sat on my bed, staring at the papers spread out around me, trying to reconcile the woman I thought was my best friend with the one who could do something so cruel. And for the first time in years, I thought about taking legal action. But when I spoke to a lawyer, he told me what I already feared: it had been too long. The adoption was closed and finalized. There was nothing I could do. Nothing except tell the truth. So that's what I did. I wrote everything down. Every detail. Every conversation. Every memory of her involvement. I sent it all to the agency, to the state board, to anyone who would listen. They launched an internal review. But even that felt hollow. The woman on the phone said something about possible ethics violations and lack of transparency, but she also made it clear that the child's placement would not be disturbed. And I agreed. Because as much as I hated Claire, I couldn't take that little girl away from the only mother she'd ever known. The damage was already done. After that, I cut all ties. I moved again, this time for good. I started therapy again, and slowly, I began to rebuild. But some nights, I still dream about her. About holding her as a baby, whispering that I loved her before letting her go. And in those dreams, she always asks the same question. "Why did you give me away?" I wake up crying every time, because the truth is, I didn't give her away. I gave her to someone I trusted. And that's what destroyed me. Life has a strange way of continuing, even when your heart refuses to. I found a small apartment near the coast and started a new job as a counselor's assistant. I told myself it was poetic, helping others rebuild when I couldn't rebuild myself. Every day, I sat across from people fighting battles they thought they'd never survive, and I reminded them that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about learning to live with the ache. Sometimes, I almost believed it. But every now and then, when I'd walk past a playground or see a mother brushing sand off her child's knees, something inside me still cracked open. There was always this quiet ache in my chest, this longing that never softened, no matter how many years stretched between us. I'd stopped checking Claire's social media. I'd stopped asking mutual friends about her. The silence was the only way I knew how to survive. Until the letter came. It was a plain envelope with no return address. The handwriting was neat, careful, almost nervous. At first, I thought it might be another notice from the agency. Maybe something about paperwork or an update about her future contact rights. but when I tore it open, my hands froze. Inside was a short note and a small folded photograph. The note read, "You don't know me, but I think you might be my mom. I found some things in our house that didn't make sense. Please, if you're her. I just want to understand." I stared at the words until they blurred. My entire body went cold. The photograph slipped from my fingers and landed face up on the table. It was her. Older now, maybe 16, with that same curious tilt of the head, that same soft smile that used to haunt my dreams. She looked like me. There was no mistaking it. My heart raced as I reread the note over and over, every line pressing deeper into me. She had found me. She had found me. I didn't know how long I sat there, crying into my hands. Hours, maybe. The sun shifted across the floor, shadows growing longer, until I finally wiped my face and pulled myself together enough to breathe. Then the panic hit. If she'd reached out to me, that meant she had questions that would shatter her world. And I wasn't sure I had the right to answer them. Did Claire know she was writing to me? Did she find out on her own? What if reaching back would ruin everything for her? What if staying silent would ruin her trust forever? I didn't sleep that night. My mind raced through every possibility. I imagined her sitting in her room, holding a photo she wasn't supposed to see, wondering who I was. And I thought about the moment years ago, when I'd been sitting on a similar bed, holding my belly, wondering who she'd become. Maybe this was life's way of closing the circle. So the next morning, I wrote back. My letter was short, hesitant. I didn't confirm anything right away. I just said that I was open to talking, that I thought I might be the person she was looking for, and that I wanted to hear her story first. I included my phone number and an email. Then I sat on my couch, staring at my phone for hours, terrified to breathe. She didn't reply for 3 days. When she finally did, it was a text. "Hi. This is Lily." Just seeing her name on my screen sent me into tears again. Lily. I hadn't known what Claire named her. I used to whisper different names in my prayers, Emma, Grace, Hannah, imagining which one fit her smile best. But Lily felt perfect. Delicate. Strong. Alive despite everything. She texted again. "Can we talk?" Our first call lasted 3 hours. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the tremor underneath, that blend of fear and hope I remembered feeling the first time I'd told someone I was pregnant. She said she'd found adoption papers hidden in Claire's desk, along with some old medical records that didn't match her name. There were photos, too, of me and Claire together, and a few letters that I'd written back when I was pregnant. She said she didn't understand why Claire had lied. I wanted to protect her. I wanted to tell her not to be angry, not to hate the woman who raised her. But I also couldn't lie anymore. So I told her the truth. I told her everything. From the moment I found out I was pregnant to the day I signed the papers. From the trust one had in Claire to the betrayal that tore my life apart. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. And when I finished, there was a long silence. Then she whispered, "I always wondered why I felt like something was missing." My heart broke all over again. Over the next few months, we spoke often, small conversations that grew into longer ones. We started emailing, then video calling. She told me about her life, about how Claire was strict but loving, how she'd always felt a weird distance between them. She said Claire had gotten sick recently, that she didn't want to upset her, but she couldn't keep pretending she didn't know the truth. One evening, Lily asked something that caught me off guard. "Do you forgive her?" I froze. I'd spent so many years trying not to feel anything toward Claire. Not anger, not forgiveness, just emptiness. But in that moment, hearing my daughter's voice, I realized that forgiveness wasn't for Claire. It was for us. So I told her, "I'm trying to." She smiled. "That's enough. A few weeks later, Lily asked if we could meet in person. I hesitated, terrified that seeing her again would unravel everything I'd built to survive. But I also knew that not seeing her would haunt me forever. So I agreed. We met at a small cafe near the ocean, neutral ground. When she walked in, I recognized her immediately. Not just because she looked like me, but because there was something in her eyes that I'd known from the moment I saw her baby picture. That spark of curiosity, that warmth. She smiled shyly as she sat down, and for a moment, it felt like no time had passed at all. We talked for hours. About everything and nothing. About her favorite classes, her dreams, her memories. She showed me pictures from her childhood, and I tried not to cry at every milestone I'd missed. And then, near the end, she said quietly, "She's dying." I looked up, confused. "Claire," she said. "Cancer. Stage 4. She doesn't have much time left." I didn't know what to say. She continued, "She doesn't know I found you. I want to tell her. But I don't know how." That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Claire. The woman who had betrayed me. The woman who had raised my daughter. I hated her for what she did. But I also couldn't ignore what she'd given Lily, a stable home, love, safety. Things I couldn't have provided back then. Maybe that was the cruel irony of it all, that both of us had loved Lily in our own broken ways. The next morning, I called Lily. "Tell her," I said softly. "But do it gently. She deserves to know you found me, even if it breaks her." A few days later, Lily called again. "I told her," she said, her voice trembling. She cried. A lot. She said she's sorry. She said she knows she ruined everything. I stayed quiet. "She wants to see you," Lily added. I wasn't sure I could face her again. But when Lily said, "Please," for me, I knew I had to. When I walked into Claire's house after nearly 2 decades, it felt like stepping into another life. The walls were lined with family photos, most of them with Lily, smiling and radiant. Claire was sitting in a chair by the window, thinner than I remembered, her hair almost gone. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't think you'd come," she whispered. "I didn't think I would either," I said. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said something I'll never forget. "I loved her too much to let her go." I nodded slowly. So did I. We sat in silence for a while. There was nothing left to fix, nothing that could undo what was done. But in that silence, there was something close to understanding. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe peace. Before I left, I told her thank you. Not for what she did, but for keeping Lily safe. For giving her the life I couldn't. She smiled weakly. "She has your heart, you know." I cried all the way home. Claire passed away 2 months later. Lily called me the day after the funeral. Her voice was quiet but steady. "She left something for you," she said. A week later, a small package arrived in the mail. Inside was a letter, yellowed and fragile, written in Claire's handwriting. "I've carried this guilt for years. I told myself I did the right thing, but I know I broke you. I can't undo what I did, but I hope someday you'll see that everything I did came from love, even the wrong parts. Take care of her, if she ever lets you. She deserves both of us." I cried for hours. Not because it fixed anything, but because it finally ended something I'd been carrying for too long. Now, years later, Lily and I are close. Not mother and daughter in the traditional sense, but something different, something deeper. We talk every week. She visits on holidays. Sometimes, she calls me Mom by accident, and we both laugh and cry at the same time. And every year, on the anniversary of her birth, we go to the ocean, the same place where I first wrote her name in the sand before saying goodbye. We sit quietly, watching the waves roll in, and I think about how life has a way of breaking you open just to fill you with something stronger. I lost her once. But somehow, through all the lies and heartbreak, she found her way back to me. And that, more than anything, feels like forgiveness.